All right. So from inside a store, what does the beginning of a category's decline look like before the analysts even really understand it? And I think when you're standing in a store, you see customers walking past displays or product that maybe in the past was selling well. And the store teams know they will see it not selling, the need to replenish or recover the area decreases. And that's not something you're going to see in a report necessarily right away. So understanding what the team members are seeing each day can make a huge difference that, an analyst might not see right away. They're seeing it because they see the customer's behaviors on a day-to-day basis. It, you start to see the conditions of the store really deteriorate, right? I mean, looking at a store holistically, like, is it clean? Is the are the floors being taken care of? Are the shelves in good condition? Does it look full? Those are telltale signs when the maintenance of the building starts to deteriorate, the quality of the product or the condition of the shelves starts to deteriorate. That is immediately a red flag. Now, if it's just one store, it could be just an execution issue. When you start seeing it across multiple stores, you know that there's probably something more going on. And it doesn't necessarily, it's a red flag. It's not a signal of, impending doom, but you have to kind of understand the why behind it. But a lot of times those are some very early signs that things aren't going well. And again, if you think about it from a customer standpoint, just the engagement with employees, if they're disengaged, if they're not really upbeat or friendly or happy, those are all warning signs that things are not going well for that company. It could be both. You almost always see the conditions deteriorate before you see the numbers, right? Because customers themselves are pretty resilient for a little while. If they're there and they've made the effort to go to the store, they're going to do everything they can to satisfy their needs. So even without help, if they can find it on the shelf somewhere, they'll probably get it. So if it's out and available, even if it's messy or not priced or whatever, customers will take care of themselves for a certain period of time. But they'll only do that for a little while. Once the resistance is greater than their desire to go through and work through that, that's one or two visits on from a customer point of view. After that, they go someplace that they can get it, that they can trust that they'll get the help that they need, they'll find what they're looking for, they'll know what they're paying for it, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I would say you'll definitely see things visually in a store before you necessarily really understand it from just the data. Now, again, this is where I think technology might be able to identify some early warning signs faster than just some of the surface level metrics. When you factor that in, yeah, there's probably some deep analysis that you could do that would maybe say, hey, we should go check this out. But then you almost invariably would walk in and see, yes, right away, there's a problem here. So what tends to get cut first in most companies when they start struggling financially is they cut the labor, right? Because it's usually the most controllable expense in a retail business. So you can start to see those signs because you're going to see less people on the sales floor. Scheduling starts to get tighter. Lines get a little longer. Stores get less recovered. I mean, all the things we were just talking about are symptoms of that reduction in cost and expenses that are being applied to the stores. So, those are definitely the things that start to break down. Um, then the other thing is you just the energy and the enthusiasm of store teams to do the right things starts to wane. So you see those other operational things break down. Standards aren't maintained. Freight backs up in the back room longer. Those are all symptoms of things that are starting to break down operationally in a struggling retailer. Tricky question. Because I think a lot of it comes down, it balances, right? I still think a lot of companies cut out people-driven programs where they shouldn't. Because again, the team members feel that, right? When you start taking stuff away from them, then they really are like, okay, well, what are you giving me? What are you investing? And look, every employee deserves, like, they get paid, right? I mean, and yes, you can say, well, we pay you for the work that you do, but it's all those other little things that really add up that are the important ones, and those tend to be the ones that get cut when things start to get tight. Um, I think the other area, and again, this is probably an unpopular, you know, mention, is if you start to recognize and realize that, things are getting not great in your stores, continuing to spend more and more money on marketing to invite people into a bad experience, to me, is just not a good idea, right? So I think, again, if you're not honest with yourself as a business that starts to find themselves in some trouble, you're probably going to make some bad decisions. And I think that's one. And I've seen it. I've seen it in companies where you continue. Well, we're losing traffic. We've got to get more people into the stores. It becomes a very vicious cycle. Now so I need to get people back in the store, so I need to spend marketing, but I've cut payroll, so there's not as many people in the store to help customers when they get there, and the conditions are worse. So what are we really spending extra money on to get there? So you really have to kind of come up with a plan and be very honest with, okay, where do we want to invest our money to create a better experience? And could you think about inviting customers back into stores in a different way as you stabilize your operational components, right? And again, the size of the organization is going to matter a lot. Dollars in big companies, they can go a long ways. But when you've got a multi-hundred store chain and you're trying to market in dozens of markets, if not hundreds of markets, then it gets a little bit trickier to do that. So it's a hard question to answer, but I think what tends to happen is we cut the kind of what seems like the fun stuff, which are people driven, which takes some of the engagement out, and then we overspend on marketing to invite people into a not great situation. So you got to pause and take a step back and say, what do we really want to do here? So first, from a leadership standpoint, look, and I've been in some of these situations, right? And especially in some of my corporate roles when the company literally went out of business, right? So the thing I will say the most is you've got to be honest with your team, right? Don't try to put way too much spin on the positive when things are clearly coming apart at the seams. You've got to be honest with your teams. And so much of it will come down to, people work for people. So, in a lot of cases, you'll find that people will stick with you till the very end, even in bad situations. But you've got to be honest with them. If you're trying to paint a picture that they can clearly see is not accurate, then they know something's even worse than what it is. Um, and then I think as a leader, you've got to also continue to look at what can we control, right? So what are the things, what decisions that we can make today that we are 100%, we can choose to be really, we can choose to be happy and kind of work through this and say, hey, look, this is a bad situation, but I'm not going to let it ruin everything around me. I'm not going to let it ruin the customer experience. Um, or we can choose to just throw up our hands and give up and just collect the paycheck for as long as we can. Um, you're not going to keep everybody. So I think you've got to always have a plan for those things. But, I think you just got to be very, very authentic. You've got to be very transparent um, and then just control the things that you can control and communicate, right? Communicate. Let people know what you know and what's going on. And they'll make the best of it. And if they choose to move on, you've got to understand and appreciate that they're looking out for themselves as they should, and then have your next plan for what do you do to kind of fill those positions as you're going through. And it's a hard situation, and I think depending on the situation, if there's a path out, you've got to continue to help people see that path out. Um, Otherwise, you basically got to make them comfortable on the way down, right? And that's a lousy situation to be in. But I think you've got to handle it situationally. And again, hopefully there's a path forward, and you then help people see it and take it one step at a time. You're not going to get to the end of the road overnight. It's going to probably take a lot of hard work and a lot of concerted effort. But if there's a path out, then work to get there. Look, in that case, the honest answer is I don't have all the answers, right? And I think what I have found that most people would rather hear you say I don't know than make something up. And I do. I think we live in a current society where people are questioning other people's truths and motives, maybe more so than ever. And there's more information, and there's more ways to get at information. I mean, so first of all, you also have to validate that information and know what is accurate. But again, I think being honest doesn't mean having all the answers. Being honest sometimes means admitting and acknowledging you don't have all the answers, and then do everything you can to get the answers to the questions that are being asked. And even still, if they aren't available, being honest about that. I've asked, I can't get that answer. I don't know why. I don't, sometimes there just isn't an answer to certain questions, or that there can't be answers to it. And again, we also live in an environment where sometimes certain people can't give you the answers because of the external ramifications of that. And while that's not good, it's part of the world we live in. So, as leaders there, I think you've got to just continue to be honest and give answers. And again, I guess I'd say in the same vein is, if I know the answer, but it's something that I can't share, that I'm honest about that as well. That it's something that, look, I can't share that information right now. I will absolutely tell you everything I can, but there are certain things that I can't share. And most people, when you explain that to them, they understand.
Let's talk more about your experience, and especially through these very disruptive times. What did you personally believe about retail that turned out to be wrong?
You cut out a lot on that one. That one, I did not understand everything you said. Can you ask that one again? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've worked for all sorts of different types of leaders. I've worked for some amazing, amazing people, and I am forever grateful for them and what they've shown me. Um, and honestly, I'm grateful for some of the people that I've worked with that I learned from, and kind of learned, well, I don't want to do that. So the thing probably the experience that I learned the most from is just when you know that other people, you're experiencing something, and then you see other people experiencing the same thing in a not good way, right? Like, you just know this person doesn't have my best interest. They're really kind of looking out for themselves, more so than the team. And there's a good learning experience that comes from that, and saying, okay, what are they doing, and what is it that I can avoid doing myself? And I think that's a constant lesson. I mean, to your point, I've been in retail, almost 40 years. I've been in leadership positions for 30 plus of those, um, more than 30 of those years. And I'm still learning. There's still tons of stuff that I see, and I get to work with people to this day, that I see how they treat people, how they engage with people, and some of it is just brilliant. It's great stuff, and I'm like, man, this is why I like being around this person. I learn so much from them, just seeing how they interact. And then you just kind of say, all right, how do I make that something I can do as well? And then there's other things you're like, yeah, I don't want to subscribe to that. And then you have to ask yourself and make sure that you aren't doing those things, because there are definite blind spots. And I do stop and I ask people, hey, what, what do you think, right? Like, am I giving you the feedback that you're looking for? Are there things I could do better? And it's hard to get that kind of feedback from people but you also have to have friends, peers, um, mentors around you that will give you that feedback, and you've got to constantly be looking for it. So, I don't think you're ever too old to learn, and I don't think there's ever a finish line on leadership. I think I mean, I guess the thing that this is probably since the beginning of time, is look, people are going to be people. And if you people want to try and change people and mold them in their own eyes versus letting each individual be themselves, and then hopefully influencing them in ways that will allow them to be their true self and still kind of go in the direction that you want them to go, right? But I mean, there's always people who want to change people, and people have to choose to change. You can't, someone else isn't going to change somebody else. You can want for them certain things, you can show them the way, you can tell them the way, you can draw the picture for them, but ultimately you can't change somebody unless they want to change. And I don't think that has anything to do with retail. I think that has everything to do with just human nature. But I see people still trying to do it, right? Like that's the thing that um, you hear, and you certainly see specific examples of it in retail. Oh, I need the store manager to be a certain way. Oh, we've got to hold people accountable this way. Most people, when you ask them those kinds of questions and you ask them, well, what is that way? How is it that you want them to hold somebody else accountable? Well, you know, that's when you start getting into these wishy-washy kind of answers, and that's the reason why it fails, right? Because you can't clearly describe the way it's going to work for somebody else because you're not them. And they see it from a however unique, however slightly different perspective. So stop trying to change people and engage with them and go along for the ride with them. And you'll probably find that you can steer them closer to the path that you're hoping than if you say, I want to change you and redirect you into a completely different place or person than what you are today. And sometimes you have to just be willing to admit or acknowledge, hey, look, this isn't a good fit. So I like you. I'm not going to change you, but this direction that you go in is not the same direction we need to go in, and be okay with that as well. Then everyone kind of still gets to be themselves versus everyone being unhappy because you're constantly trying to change them. I think in today's day and age, for somebody who's going to try and turn something around, the first thing to do is stop, catch your breath, and then observe what's actually going on. I think too often we are very action biased and we feel like I've got to do something immediately versus fully understanding what's really causing why we have what we have today. Right. So you see it with, CEOs go in, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, I need some time to really observe. And then yet on day 4, they're like trying to adjust everything and start making changes. Look, and I've made this mistake before where, I get into a new organization, you bring your ideas, really even an expectation has been set. Hey, you're here to help us get going in a different direction. And you want to start proving yourself right away. And if you don't take a little bit of time to get to know people and what's really happening and what is working or what isn't working and why, then you start to make mistakes you wouldn't ordinarily, and you start to burn people out, either because you're taking them down the wrong direction, or they just don't understand what you're doing, because you're trying to go so fast, you're not taking that step back. And again, I think the biggest miss in turnarounds is being curious at the beginning to understand why you need to turn around in the first place. If people took a little bit more time to understand that, they'd probably figure the way out much faster and bring more people along the way than kind of the churn and burn that tends to happen when somebody wants to go in and quote turn things around. So really the first thing I do is say pause and observe, understand what you're in, then start making a plan to go forward.